The critics are praising The Princess Bride. Roger Ebert.
I'm going to say right now that I thought this was one of the funniest and most charming comedies that I've seen in a long time.
Joel Siegel.
Rob Reiner's found the place where Walt Disney meets Monty Python. He's made a movie that's exciting and thrilling. It's an adventure film, a love story. It's very funny and absolute magic.
Bye-bye, boys!
Have fun storming the castle.
The Princess Bride. Rated PG. Now playing at theaters everywhere.
Well, we're kicking off February with a little romance and a little adventure. And we're going to start with a story that I used to read to David every time he got a little sick, a little under the weather. This would always cheer him up a little bit. We're going to be looking at The Princess Bride. That's right. Welcome back to a brand new episode of ReconCinemation. I'm your host, John Diner.
I'm David Munchak.
I'm Brent Hutchins.
And this is the podcast that takes a look back at some of our favorite films from the 70s, 80s, and 90s. We're checking out how they hold up here today. And it's another big one. This one's been on the list since the beginning.
Absolutely. It was
Classic.
When we were making the list. We got to launch a podcast. We got to talk movies. What are the hot movies we're going to ReconCinemize? And I don't know what number it was, but it's definitely a top choice.
This was like top 5, and it stayed in the top 5 for 6 years until...
It finally came around.
Yeah. It was time. But 2024, here we are. We're doing The Princess Bride. I'm very excited. There's a lot to talk about on this one.
Absolutely. This is a childhood favorite.
Yeah, totally. And there's so much here, and there's so much history in this movie. But let's before we get into the film, let's get through some of our segments here. So I'm going to start off with our game 6 Degrees of ReconCinemation, where I'm going to throw out a movie, and David and Brent by the end of the episode are going to connect The Princess Bride to it in as few moves as possible. So I'm going to throw out another fairy tale movie. That's right, the 1985 Arnold Schwarzenegger fairy tale Commando.
Yeah. That's exactly where I thought you were going with that.
I know, you saw that one coming.
All right. I'm thinking through it already.
All right. So we'll circle back at the end of the episode, see what you guys came up with. But yeah, Brent, we're going to change it up a little bit. Brent, why don't you run us through what's happening in The Princess Bride?
The Princess Bride is a classic fairy tale adventure that combines romance, humor, and fantasy. The story revolves around the true love between Buttercup and Wesley, who is presumed dead but returns as the dread pirate Roberts. Buttercup is set to marry Prince Humperdinck against her will. As she navigates political intrigue and danger, Wesley, along with an eclectic group of companions, including Inigo Montoya and Fezzik, strives to rescue her. The film is known for its witty dialogue, memorable characters, and a narrative structure that includes a framing device where a grandfather reads the story to his grandson. Full of swashbuckling action, the movie is a delightful mix of romance, adventure, with a touch of whimsical charm.
A lot of whimsy in Princess Bride. All right, thank you, Brent. David, bring us back to the incredible year that was 1987. What's happening here?
In 1987, around October 9th.
Yeah,
when this
October
movie
9th.
premiered.
Yep.
So when The Princess Bride premiered, you may have heard people asking, "Who's that girl?" Talking about Robin Wright making her big studio film debut, but they also might have been talking about Madonna and her music single and the movie of the same name that came out that year. Ronnie Ray is still the U.S. president, bumbling around the White House, and audiences met a new captain of the USS Enterprise D, with Star Trek: The Next Generation debuting only a couple weeks before this movie came out. Kids are crushing the trading card game with Garbage Pail Kids. Postage stamps only cost 22 cents in the United States. And NBC dominated the airwaves with things like The Cosby Show, Golden Girls, Alf, and LA Law. And ABC followed close behind with Growing Pains, Who's the Boss, and Moonlighting. And Fox was just getting started in prime time with 21 Jump Street, Married with Children, America's Most Wanted, and a lot of others. Also, Whitney Houston, Whitesnake, and Lisa and Cult Jam were hitting the top of the Billboard charts around this time of the year. Baby Jessica McClure would fall down the well and capture the heart of a nation in just another week or two from the premiere of this movie. And the U.S. stock market would crash in October, which would affect international markets. It was a crazy time.
It was. Remember the whole Baby Jessica thing?
Baby Jessica.
Goodness. Yeah.
I didn't remember it as a news story, but I remember the TV miniseries like the following year. Yeah. I was like, wait, this really happened? What?
She was
I think that's how it got on our radar. Right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Just that when that was in Texas, right? That was like a big. Was it Texas?
I think so.
I think it was. Yeah.
I feel like the Texan in the room would remember.
I was in Texas. I was in Texas. I remember it being on the news for sure.
He was too busy. He was too busy with the Garbage Pail Kids cards. He was too busy dealing.
Those are facts. That's no doubt. I wish I had kept those, man. I took them all off because they were stickers, and I put them all over my bed and my dresser.
Yeah,
I'm such an idiot.
Oh yeah, I had all those over magazines and comic books. Like totally ruined them. You know,
they have them still. You can still buy them.
You could. Yeah, there's new sets now.
There's new sets. I have a handful.
Brainy Brian.
Nostalgia. Adam Bomb is the only one.
Adam Bomb. Bad Breath Seth. That was a pretty good. Nasty Nick.
Well, we should hold off the Baby Jessica talk till we on our other podcast where we talk through 80s TV movies of the week. We could talk about the Baby Jessica movie over there too.
One
of our many side podcasts that we do. But yeah, let's get back to Princess Bride. When was the first time this movie came on your radar? Brent, we'll start with you. Did you see it in the theater or was it a home video deal?
You know, I can't remember. I feel like it was a home video deal that and my mom rented it for me to watch when I was sick. And I feel like it was a double feature of like this and maybe something like The Boy Who Could Fly. I don't know. It was a Fred Savage heavy day. And I don't know if that's actually when I saw it or I've just created that memory in my head because I love the like that grandfather reading to the grandson aspect of this movie. But I recall having very similar kind of feelings of like the kissing and all that stuff and the love story aspect. And so anytime Fred would interject, I'd be like, yeah, dude, we're on the same page. So I'm going to go with that, but I can't confirm it.
Okay, that's fair. That feels right though. That feels that feels accurate. David, what about you?
I felt this was a movie that was on TV almost every weekend, it seemed for me. So I don't even remember renting it. I didn't see it in the theater, I don't think, but I'd seen so many parts of this movie and the entire film so many times from its television broadcasts over time. I mean, I don't remember the first time, but it was it's one of those movies that was always there for me. So many moments and lines, all the so many lines are pretty much just have a rhythmic quality. Like it's a lullaby to this ancient brain. So it's hard to even find moments that like to be surprised by or like things I never noticed. I mean, just watching it again, I'm like, there's nothing new here. I know this. I couldn't quote it from start to finish blindly, but I know the movie inside and out. Like, and it's just it's just always been there.
The movie's like a great sandwich that you never get tired of. You know, you go to Cantor's Deli or wherever, and you get that roast beef sandwich or that corned beef, and you know, it's just great every time. It's the same thing. Like
never misses.
I don't think watching it now, it's not one of those movies where you do find like all those hidden things and it's like, oh, there's something new that I didn't see the first 10 times I saw it, but I'm still catching that. Like some of the other Christopher Guest things, like you can get that, and there's obviously other comedies where you can. This isn't that, but it's just still so beautiful as a movie. Doesn't age, but I saw this. This was a movie that my dad definitely picked up on a Friday night movie tradition. Pizza and a movie. He'd pick up pizza, pick up a movie from Movies One in Peekskill, New York, and we would enjoy Friday night together. And this was definitely one of those. And I feel like I saw it a bunch of times in that like 1988, maybe 89 zone. And then I never saw it again till I think it came out on DVD, and sort of rediscovered it. It was another, I mentioned this before, like just as sometimes as you go through your teenage years and into college, there's certain movies that just disappear from your radar. And for me, this was one of those that I almost never even thought about it till when it came on DVD. I was like, oh my God, yeah, like absolutely, yes, and fell way back in love with it. And then as my kids got a little bit older, we watched it together, and same thing, just everybody in the house loves it, and it's definitely one we can put on and just have a good time with. So
I think it's pretty great that transition from VHS to DVD. Like a lot of these like movies that kind of, we saw as children, but then aged out of a little bit, they got re-released on DVD with extras, and it kind of rekindled a lot of our loves for some of these older films that were childhood favorites, but had been off our radar. So, this is certainly one of those. There's so many though, but this is one of them for sure.
yeah. And I think there's so much, I don't know if it's just, I don't think it's just our age group, but it is especially our age group about what's so identifiable about this movie. And I think it is that the frame story of Fred Savage as the grandson and Peter Falk as the grandfather. That's such a brilliant way to get an audience like into your story that us as kids, like you were saying, Brent, completely identified with Fred Savage.
Right.
That
it almost deceives you, right? Like I'm almost positive the reason I didn't see this in the theater is because the movie's title is called The Princess Bride, right? And that as a child didn't resonate with me as a young boy. But then you're homesick or you're home, it gets rented on VHS, and you're watching it, and right out of the gate, the initial connection is Fred Savage, who at the time was, like I don't know if Wonder Years was out yet or not, but
Wonder Years, I think, started in '88, so I think it was right after this.
Okay, so but he had started to show up in things, but he's relaying information. Again, this is all from a perspective of like a young boy growing up at the time, but he's relaying information that you're feeling as you're watching. I just rewatched this again for the podcast, and I watched it with my son, who's currently, he's 11, and same reactions, like he's just echoing the same kind of feeling and uneasiness of some of the opening love story stuff. And then this cool, fun adventure with intrigue and this Dread Pirate Roberts. And like, it's this awesome sword fight. You got Andre the Giant, who at the time for us was a big deal at
Huge.
That age.
But big reason I saw the movie.
Yeah, my son, who's only just barely grazed professional wrestling, knows who Andre the Giant is. The guy's still, he passed away so many years ago, but he's still larger than life and totally recognizable. And it's like the story just continues to develop and get more and more fun. It's really well crafted, and it's very smart about what it's doing, and it makes it impossible to not like sit down and watch and just kind of get completely enamored by.
I think there's a lot of young, especially boys, who probably were not turned on to the movie by the title, knowing it's a love story. I'm sure there's plenty that are, but there's also a section that wasn't, and starting it off immediately with like the grandson saying the exact same things that the young audience is thinking is like brings you right in, and you identify with him, and then you're on board as the grandfather. Really a sweet story of the grandfather visiting his grandson, who's kind of sick and crabby and doesn't want to hear it and just wants to like lay there and play video games, and how the grandfather has to kind of elbow his way into the grandson's life there. Just like this story is having to do with some of the audience, right? But it certainly does. And really that love story is really just the first 5 minutes of the movie, and then before we get to Dread Pirate Roberts, and then then it's taken care of. So such a smart way to frame the story. So right off the bat, just good way to identify with your audience. And overall, like, just the mixing of genres here, like it's a romance, it's action, it's adventure, it's got great characters, it's funny, it's clever. It's such a great blend of all these different genres. It's and a lot of that is some of that is due to like these great casting choices, which we're going to get into. But this cast is incredible. Even Andre the Giant, like, it's really bold casting choices that these people, looking at where they were in their careers, like, nobody's really a star. I guess Andre the Giant's technically the biggest star in the movie, right?
I mean, kind of, but he's also like obscure, like, I mean, he's
a star to a particular audience, but like you were saying, he's also one of those characters that went beyond professional wrestling. He was a huge star, about to be bigger, right after he shot this movie, right before it released. But
I mean, maybe the bigger name is Peter Falk, because at that time, like, he was he was Columbo, and that was an extremely popular show. But like, you're right, there's not anybody in here who carried A-list star power by any means.
Right.
I used to watch on cable or the Saturday afternoon affiliates and all that, it would often be, welcome back to The Princess Bride, starring Billy Crystal and Carol Kane. And it was always Billy Crystal and Carol, because Billy Crystal was the biggest name. I think he was probably the biggest name.
Right. You're right. I forgot about Billy. Yeah.
Stand up, but he's relegated to a character under heavy makeup that's around for 2 scenes. That it's 5 minutes of the movie, and it's great. It's wonderful, and it's pure, like, Billy Crystal in his element, like, perfect. Of course, Rob Reiner would bring him in. Like, it's a perfect part. Like, it's just. But I mean, he's not the star of the movie by any stretch or anything like that. He's a glorified cameo, but a scene stealer nonetheless.
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah. Well, we'll talk about Billy and Miracle Max here.
Absolutely.
But I think you guys are right. It's the top 3, I guess we'd say, is Billy Crystal, Peter Falk, Andre the Giant.
Yeah.
And none of them are the lead characters.
Yeah. And Andre the Giant is the type. I mean, that was the thing about wrestling. Like, even people that didn't watch WWF wrestling at the time, like, they knew who some of these superstars were. They knew they were household names. Their kids were talking about them, or they're showing up in other media or whatever.
Yeah.
And just like him being in this movie, it's like a lot of audiences, I'm sure, like, a lot of parents, like, probably knew who he was, even though they've never seen a wrestling match,
Well, and that's what's funny about wrestling is, like, when you ask anybody, literally, like, anybody on the street, you can ask them, like, they're gonna say Hulk Hogan, Andre the Giant, Roddy Piper, Macho Man, Ultimate Warrior. You don't have to be a fan, because certain people, when they get to a certain level, just become part of pop culture.
Yeah.
Whether you watch it or not, you just know of them. So, and Andre for sure was at that, probably at this time it was really just Hogan and Andre.
Right. Yeah.
So,
everybody knows who Hulk Hogan was, or he is, or whatever.
Still, like now you can throw, Steve Austin and The Rock in there, but that's like, it's still that list of people, and some of them have been dead for quite a number of years. Andre's been dead just about 31 years, almost to the day, as this airs. So,
oh wow,
and has he really?
Yeah, January 93.
Man, I thought it was more recent than that. That's crazy.
Yeah, but he's still, people still know of him. Like, HBO has a great documentary that came out about him. There's books, and it's still a relevant name. But that's when an athlete or a performer or whatever becomes part of pop culture, they just stay there. They don't really disappear too much. So
Yeah.
but I mean, but everyone else, all the lead roles, Wesley, Buttercup, Inigo, all basically new faces to the big screen. Not necessarily their first role, but first lead role like this for sure.
Yeah.
And all would go on to have amazing careers, which we're gonna kind of walk through in a little bit. But the other thing, I just love the tone of this movie. There's something about the cinematography, the design of the sets, the lighting, the music, Mark Knopfler's beautiful score, that all comes together, and it feels like a children's fairy tale to me. Do you guys feel that way? Like, does it have that sense to you?
Absolutely.
Yeah, this is definitely reads like any fairy tale, like just like, because it's got just enough adventure and fantasy elements, and that like the stakes are all the same of those like fairy tales, like sort of rescuing the princess who's who doesn't want to marry the king or whatever. Like that's exciting. That's exciting fantasy stuff. Easy to access,
And I think there's just visually, I think there's a soft texture to, that's there, that's not in the frame story of the grandfather and the grandson. So you have a very subtle visual difference that, like, okay, you're in fantasy world now.
Yeah.
And now you're back in reality.
It almost works as like, in my head, those watercolor pictures that were used in a lot of fairy tale books.
Yes.
Where it's like kind of faded edges and things like that. Like it represents the same.
Yeah. It's so it's so, in a way, to me, like, this is one of Rob Reiner's most visual movies because of that, because he doesn't, I mean, his other movies don't really require it either, whether the dramas or comedies or whatever, but it's just, he doesn't make a big visual move like that, like I feel like you have here. And it's very subtle, but I feel like it's distinct.
I feel like he uses that same trick in Stand By Me.
I guess,
which I also just rewatched, and the bookends with your favorite Ricky Dreyfuss are more crisp, and then the kid's story is again kind of more that soft edge kind of look.
I think you're probably right. I haven't seen that in a while, but I think I recall that.
Yeah.
Stand By Me, great film too.
We'll talk more about it in a second, I think.
Even with Richard Dreyfuss.
Ricky D.
All right, well, let's, since we brought him up, let's talk about Rob Reiner, who's had such an amazing career. Really, the man has made some incredible films that I feel like, when you talk about America's, at least in our lifetime, top directors, you talk about Spielberg, you talk about Scorsese, I don't think Rob Reiner really gets brought up to that level like the others. But maybe he should, because when you look at his body of work, especially the first, I think, 10 of his first 11 movies, like everything he directs up through The American President, except maybe North, are like big wins, big, creatively interesting. I mean, some of those movies are huge, important movies culturally, and I don't think he gets the credit for those that I think he deserves.
I agree. I mean, I think he's super strong out of the gate. Obviously, I feel like there's a pretty significant drop past American President.
There is,
and I don't know that he's ever really been able to recapture a lot of the magic that he had in that early run. But I mean, those early movies, I mean, we already mentioned Stand By Me, which for me, honestly, might be my favorite of his movies. But Spinal Tap is the one that probably most people would gush over, I mean, along with things like The Princess Bride. But I mean, When Harry Met Sally, huge, arguably the best romantic comedy, like it's on every list. Misery is fantastic. Few Good Men, all of those are maybe they don't have the staying power of some of the others, but like A Few Good Men, when it came out, was a massive success.
Yeah.
And Misery is the same. Like
Well, and
they're
I would argue that some of them do. I think Spinal Tap, I think Stand By Me, Princess Bride, When
yeah.
Harry Met Sally, Misery for sure. All of those have legs, and modern audiences can still. Yeah, I think when Harry Met Sally is one that still has a huge impact, but it's also like if you have a hard time with the Billy Crystal of it, and he's
Sure.
so
I mean,
yeah.
I think you're right. I think they have staying power. I guess what I'm saying is like if you go back and rewatch any one of those, you're going to be entertained and they're going to be good movies. And you're not going to feel like you wasted your time. I
Right.
think today there's probably only a couple that people like that would come up in conversation like kind of naturally. And maybe I have a bias because I hang in film circles or whatever, but like I think Spinal Tap comes up pretty regularly.
Yep.
I think Princess Bride comes up regularly. I think When Harry Met Sally comes up regularly. Like those three.
I agree. I would throw Misery in there too. That's there's at least one iconic scene in that movie, and really in all
absolutely.
these movies that still come up. So
yeah, I would put that. I think that people talk about it. I put it like kind of maybe just a tier lower, but I mean, absolutely. If you get talking about Rob Reiner, or you talk about, Kathy Bates, or you're talking, I mean, James Caan, like that movie comes up because they carry it, and that scene is freaking devastating.
Yeah.
It's worse than the book, but nonetheless, those movies, people are still talking about them. I don't know that anybody really, I mean, I guess the bucket list comes up occasionally, but that's now just because I'm old and
not a lot
I gotta be checking shit off that list.
Not a lot of Alex and Emma talk these days.
No, so I mean, I hear the new Al Brooks Defending My Life documentary is pretty good, which is the latest thing that Reiner did. But yeah,
the documentary is really good, and it's part of it is about his friendship with Albert Brooks. And when we did our broadcast news episode, which you can listen to in the archives at ReconCinemation.com, after that I went down an Albert Brooks hole and really rediscovered his work and fell in love with him. And that documentary is a good guide going through his life and his career. But Rob Reiner is the director and also kind of the anchor point of it. So, but Rob Reiner was really he's really set up for success from life, like coming into the world as the son of Carl Reiner, who's one of the top TV writers and off the Dick Van Dyke Show, and had just a legendary career. And then Rob coming up as an actor and coming into All in the Family, which is historically one of the top television shows of all time, and working with great talent along the way and being mentored by people like Norman Lear, all of that kind of, and crossing paths with people like Albert Brooks and becoming friends with this group of comedians, comic actors, writers that are all coming up through this 1970s, kind of leads him to this brilliant career as a director in the 1980s. And being able to work with Christopher Guest and Harry Shearer and Michael McKean on Spinal Tap, which is 100% a movie we're going to cover, is an incredible film. And that's just the beginning for him. And then, even The Sure Thing is not a movie that a lot of people talk about, but it's an 80s John Cusack film that comes out right around Better Off Dead. So if you're a fan of, and we've talked about John Cusack quite a number of times here on the show.
I love John Cusack.
Brent loves Cusack. We know that.
I do.
The Sure Thing is definitely one you should check out. It's not a flawless film, and it definitely feels like, it's Rob's first. Spinal Tap is a fake documentary, so it's a particular style, and this is his first feature as a traditional story. So, I think he's still learning his way a little bit, but certainly after that, Stand By Me is an excellent film, and then that leads to The Princess Bride. So he's really on quite a upward momentum. Yeah, so this is his fourth film out of 21 films as of 2024. So, and as we are recording this, it's announced that the Spinal Tap sequel is about to start shooting. So,
Oh boy.
Great.
David's excited. I'm a huge Spinal Tap fan, a huge Christopher Guest fan. You know, we talked about it in our Waiting for Guffman episode, but I'm a little nervous about that. They've actually done follow-ups to Spinal Tap before. There was a movie in 1994, I think it was called The Return of Spinal Tap, that came and went and did not receive the, you know, the release that the first one did or the praise. It was very quietly done.
I think it's cool that, you know, these old guys can just come together and hang out with each other and make a movie. Like, you know, whatever, they're gonna have fun. They don't care if it's gonna be a box office hit. They're just gonna have fun being funny together, and like, yeah, take those victory laps.
And I think it will be a box office hit, even if it's not a great film, because on name value alone, it's been a little while since we've seen a Christopher Guest movie, and he has said he's not making those fake documentaries anymore. So, and I'm sure their age is going to be the main point of the story, that they're however old they are and they're still touring, you know, like a not as successful version of the Rolling Stones.
Right. Yeah, there's so much you can mine from it, and they're just gonna have fun. So that's cool. I mean, it's like what Adam Sandler does now. He just has fun making movies with his friends, and a studio will pay for it. So why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you just do whatever?
And I think people have been asking for it for. I mean, when we were in college, I remember it coming up that they should be doing a sequel. When the DVD came out, it was like, why isn't there another Spinal Tap movie? It'd be so funny. So that was, you know, I would say that wasn't last year when that happened.
Right. Yeah.
I won't put a year on it, but all right. So let's talk about kind of how this movie came to be and the development of it. This was written as the novel was actually written by William Goldman, who was one of the top screenwriters throughout the 1970s. He got huge after Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid came out. That was, you know, his first real huge win. But he also writes All the President's Men and, you know, a number of great films in the 70s, and is but also wrote novels as well. So he wrote the book version, and he titled it because he wrote it for his two daughters, and one wanted a story about a princess, the other wanted a story about a bride. So he said,
there you go,
put those together. Bride. Princess Bride, boom. But the have you guys read the novel?
I haven't.
No.
It's very similar, but there's also parts that are extremely different from the movie. So, and he's gone in and tinkered with it, like George Lucas tinkers with Star Wars every year. William Goldman, before his passing, went in and kept, you know, making little adjustments to the book. So there's a different frame story that, you know, in the book, he's remembering his grandfather reading this book called The Princess Bride to him, and it's about his search for that author. Like William Goldman is like the main character here, who's searching for that author so he can find the book and, you know, maybe write it into a movie. So he, like, it's very self-referential, very meta, talking about Hollywood, talking about like how he wrote Butch Cassidy, you know, all that's part of the story. And he's a very like, you know, sexist guy. He's kind of a jerk, the way he's written that character. And he's trying to, you know, read this book to his son, who has no interest in it at all. And he's like he calls his son a jerk, and like there's like it's a totally different setup for it. But then once you get into the story, then he goes into the story like we do in the movie, and that's pretty much what we have in the movie. It just, like any novel, it's a lot more detail. Like you get a lot more detail about Inigo's backstory and his father and what happened there and how his father was killed. And, the torture scene is much more elaborate for Wesley. So there's just some of that, but that's normal differences between a book and a screenplay. So, but he writes the screenplay in 1973 and
Wow.
and was shopping it around. And over the next like 14 years, there's 4 different studios that buy the options, can't figure out how to do it, and release the rights. So it's bouncing around for quite some time. Goldman gets so frustrated by this point that he actually buys the rights in, I want to say, like 1982, 1983, somewhere around that zone. And so he's the owner of it, and he is in charge of its fate. So he had actually approached Carl Reiner somewhere in the 70s to be the director for this film. And that's actually where Rob Reiner discovered the book. So that connection was made like 10 years prior. Carl Reiner didn't end up making it, and I think made a ton of early Steve Martin movies instead. But Rob loved it and knew that, if it was still around when he got to where he wanted to go, that this was a movie he wanted to come back to. Yeah, and he turned around to his friend Norman Lear, who helped bring in the financing and helped get the movie produced. It's a movie that was released by MGM, but I think it was pretty much made as almost like an independent film. So they were in charge of the distribution. So so it was a really well. Go ahead, David.
Yeah, I guess they got to. You get to do whatever you wanted with this. Get to have a little fun. Like, this is a great story to like I'm glad he got exposed to it. And it's like that's definitely one of the first movies he wanted to make, and it's got all that elements. It's a 4-quadrant film. It's a lot of fun. It's just going to the movies, and everyone can have a good time with it. And you got to appreciate that, because it's not like he's like, I want to make an adventure film or a straight comedy or anything like that. Like, you don't even know the movie's funny until 15 minutes in, other than the framing story has got some whimsy to it, but it's not like you wouldn't necessarily know it's a comedy until you start piecing all these disparate elements together.
You need to see it play out.
I think you need the 3 bandits. Once the 3 bandits come in, that's when the comedy, at least for me, starts really ramping up.
But it's fast. The movie's fast paced, so it's not. I think as a kid, I felt like it took a little bit longer to get to the 3 bandits, but watching it now, it's like, no, they get there very quickly.
Yeah, it doesn't take any time.
Yeah. I mean, we just started off with the frame story. We meet Fred Savage, and I always thought it was really cool that he had all real toys. That's what I like about E.T. and this. One of the things, that little detail of these are real. There's real toys behind him. There's Star Wars toys. There's Captain America. If you look, they're not generic fake toys that you see in a lot of movies who, maybe they just skirted around the licensing of all that. But there's the mindset of, we're not marketing this movie off of those things. So we are making it realistic as it would exist in real life. Toys just sitting there. We're not saying Captain America is a part of this movie, so we're trying to make money off Marvel without paying them. That's always such a clearance concern. But yeah, that made it feel real and made it feel legitimate. And obviously, he's playing a real Nintendo game of the day, and when you see generic things like that, it's always just a little bit it's a little bit of a ding with me that takes you out just a little bit, not enough to derail the movie or anything, but it just loses a sense of realism that we do have here. And one small detail, I don't know if you guys caught it, but in the background you can see Rob Reiner's baseball style hat. His hat from Spinal Tap, Marty DiBergi's hat, is hanging on a coat rack in the background.
No kidding.
Now, and that was the backstory on that was when he approached Mark Knopfler from Dire Straits to do the music and the score. Knopfler was like, "I will do it, but you have to." Like, my stipulation is that that hat's got to be in the movie somewhere.
Huh.
And then he did it. Then Rob Reiner did it, and Knopfler was like, "Oh, I was totally kidding."
That's really funny. I did
Yeah.
not pick up on that. I've never picked
Yeah.
up on that. That's hilarious.
I never did either. And then I heard the story and I saw it, and yep, it's sitting there.
No, kudos to the art department getting, the framing story correct. It's, it's a 3-walled set pretty much,
Yeah.
just shot in over one day probably at
It looks like a sitcom
stage.
set, you know?
Uh-huh. Yeah, and then but getting all those details right, it does matter. Like and so then it mirrors like a reality of a kid's bedroom. So then
Yeah.
when you go to the fantasy world, you can buy that it's the fantasy world, and then it's a slow build because then it's just like the names of things are interesting and just starting to sound more like a big adventure, and it takes its time to get there, or the right amount of time. It's not like a slow thing, but like it builds and builds. It's like, oh, this is just a big, just crazy fun adventure. Like they're gonna, and you're just rooting for the two of them to get together. And one of my favorite parts though, like is after they beat all the bandits, and then she tosses him down the hill, and then she jumps off the hill after him, and like that's when it's like, okay, everything. That's when they get to let loose. Like it's pure comedy from here on out. I mean, even though all of that stuff leading up to it was funny, they get to be together and do the joke. I don't know. I love that moment. She's just my Wesley, and she just tosses herself over.
Yeah.
And then just the oomph, ooh, and then just rolling and the cuts.
That huge hill. Yeah.
Yeah. Like it looks like it's 80 degrees, like just like the way it's shot. It's just such a fun.
That's your as you wish moment, or one of them. So
yeah.
As you wish.
Oh, my sweet Wesley. What have I done? Ow. Oh. Ooh. 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 Ow. Ooh. 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 Ow. Ouch.
we've got Fred Savage kind of echoing a lot of our thoughts going into this movie of like we're hesitant about this love story business, and he's like literally saying our thoughts out loud. But you can, you're on board with him immediately, and then you go into the story and how I think it's perfect casting with the two of them, with Carrie Elwes as Wesley and Robin Wright as Princess Buttercup.
Yeah,
they're great together. Great, blonde, beautiful, in love like people.
The cover of a romance novel really is that
right.
kind of look, and both were young, fresh actors that I think Carrie Elwes had only been in I think one movie at this point, and Rob Reiner saw him and said, that's the guy, and he's so good, and he's played it a number of times, like this kind of role between this and Robin Hood Men in Tights, and he's got that kind of swashbuckling and Douglas Fairbanks kind of energy to him that I think you even see it in Hot Shots, which is an underrated movie, and his performance in it is underrated, that he's got that that presence.
Good old Hot Shots.
I'm a fan of like when Carrie Elwes was showing up and things like that was always fun for me, because it's like for Hot Shots and Men in Tights is one of the like just the funniest movies, even though it's been a while, but Prince of Thieves was such like a zeitgeisty movie and kind of persisted with the soundtrack from that, so it persisted longer than some movies would, and then just totally Mel Brooks taking that and just having fun with it, and Carrie Elwes was like perfect. Like he is like a Leslie Nielsen type, I think, in a lot of ways. He plays things so straight, and he's just so aware of everything that goes on. So yeah, just for him to be like early in his career with this one, and to he knows he's good looking, and he knows he's this he's got the reputation of that pirate, but then he's also in love, and then he just the jokes and the charm between him and Mandy Patinkin, for instance, like it's just they work so well together. Like
Yeah.
it's just what a crew. Like so to carry a whole, carry a majority of the movie on his shoulders is pretty impressive.
Could you
Yeah, there
see
just
though?
seems-
Oh, go ahead, Brent.
I was just going to say there just seems to be such great chemistry across the entire cast. At least of our heroines, right? Like they all seem to they're believable. They feed off each other and work off each other really well. Like you used a good word, David. The charm. It's very charming, and it's just, it to say it's relatable is weird because it's a fantasy story, but like you want to root for all of them, and they like very quickly, have you kind of on their side and believe their story. Like they want to work together. You want them to work together. Like Inigo Montoya's story is fantastic. Like he's obviously, his revenge story is super compelling and a hilarious kind of through line throughout the entire thing. So yeah, it's nice to, I think part of the reason it works so well is because you're not caught up in any of them being big stars, but they're all really great character actors who don't take away from the story by being bigger than the story, right? And so it's real easy to just sink your teeth into what the narrative instead of all the other kind of flashy things that could happen in other movies.
I'm going to throw out two other names and tell me what you think for them as Wesley. Kevin Kline, Christopher Reeve.
I think Kline could do it.
This is Kline. Kevin Kline, like, he's done a few movies already, but he has not done Fish Called Wanda yet. So
yeah, I would be. I mean, I think the casting is perfect, but Kline would be an interesting option. Not so much with Reeve. Like,
and I think he was so clearly established as Superman at that point. I would probably say almost typecast that he probably would have loved a role like this, and I think he could have done a good job. But it would be hard not to see Superman.
It'd be an uphill battle for sure. I mean, I would immediately be taken out of it as a, from the Superman standpoint.
You'd be climbing up that hill as an audience, like the one Wesley fell down.
That's correct.
Yeah.
They're all basically, this movie defines like these actors for me, for a lot of these actors for me, that I don't see them beyond like any of their numerous roles, or I don't see them beyond like these particular roles, even though they might have storied careers and lots of parts and so many projects, but like they're almost this entire cast. They're all, if I think of them, that cast member, I think of them in their role in this movie, like first.
Yeah. Yep, I totally hear you. I think it's a lot of their, not to say their peak, but this is just probably their most memorable role.
Yeah. I think it became something everyone got, so many people of our generation just got so familiar with, and parts of it or the whole of it just gets embedded in your brain. I'm like, oh, Mandy Patinkin's a serious actor?
Yeah.
What are you talking about?
That was a surprise. I remember the next time I saw him after this was Alien Nation, and he's under all that makeup, and I was like, that's Inigo Montoya? Are you kidding me?
Right. Holy crap.
But Robin Wright only got cast about a week before filming, and there was a lot of actresses that they went through. Uma Thurman, Meg Ryan, Sean Young, Whoopi Goldberg was on the list. Courtney Cox, all those people auditioned for the part, and would have maybe been interesting, but maybe not at the right time in their career. Robin Wright came on their radar and went to meet Reiner and Goldman at I think Rob Reiner's house, and he said he opened the door and she's in this little sundress and her hair's glowing, and they're like, that's it. That's her. That's Buttercup right there.
That's the one.
Yeah, and I think she, same thing as Carrie Elwes, just fit perfectly, and they look right together. They're similar age wise, so there's not that like kind of age discrepancy that you do see sometimes. And I think even in When Harry Met Sally, like the actual age difference between Meg Ryan and Billy Crystal is more significant than you think.
Yeah.
And clearly Meg Ryan would come back on would stick with Rob Reiner for that film, and he saw something in her, but maybe not the right part for this one.
Yeah. Just a perfect cast, everybody.
Yep.
Very
I'm looking at I'm just staring at it.
Yeah, I mean it is. It really is. Like he's just as swashbuckling as Carrie Elwes is, but he's got that different edge, and he's clearly got and Inigo's backstory of wanting revenge for the death of his father that you don't see immediately when we meet the three bandits. That they're just, at first they're just three kind of interesting bandits, and it takes a minute before you start to break the surface. And in the book, they go into Fezzik's background much more. I mean, they don't really go into it at all in the film, so there's more to his character, but there's no way you're not looking at those three. I mean, they couldn't look more different from each other between Wallace Shawn and Mandy Patinkin and Andre the Giant. Such a ragtag group.
What a group.
That Vicini, he can fuss.
Fuss. Think you like to scream at us?
Probably he means no harm.
He's really very short on charm.
You have a great gift for rhyme.
Yes. Some of the time.
Enough of that! Fezzik, are there rocks ahead?
If they are, we all be dead.
No more rhymes now, I mean it!
Anybody want to feel it?
Yeah!
Yeah, Andre was I mean, such an immense figure in more ways than one. And he's coming, when they're shooting this, it's sort of the end of 1986. So he had taken a hiatus from wrestling. I know all this because I'm a massive wrestling fan, especially at the time. And he was in physically really deteriorating condition. That his physical condition with the ailments that he had, that he was gaining a lot of weight. Like he had gained 100 pounds in like almost a year and a half prior to this. So it was much harder to move around. A lot of problems with his knees, a lot of problems with his back, but obviously a look that you can't, Arnold Schwarzenegger could have played it, but it wasn't, you don't have the height, you don't have the, it's a different look. So, yeah. And he had problems, he had to drink a lot to keep his pain under control. I mean, he would drink bottles of wine a day, like massive amounts. There's famous stories about it that, there's certain shots where like they had to build ramps for him to walk on. So it's easier where, the shot where he catches Buttercup, jumping out the window, all that he had to be completely supported, or there's, very crafty cinematography going on that, he wasn't able to do some of that work that he normally would have. And this, when the movie releases, this is his, like, he's really at his peak, because the showdown with Hulk Hogan at WrestleMania 3 happens earlier in 1987, which is where we were talking about earlier, that crossover into pop culture, that, that visual of, there's a famous shot of like Hogan and Andre like face to face, and the size difference, and it's a good image that was out there everywhere at this time. Yeah. So definitely capitalizing on his popularity. And Fezzik is such a sweet character that how could Fezzik fall in with Wallace Shawn here? He's such like a lovable character that, it's hard to believe. Like once you start to get to know them, like, God, Inigo and Fezzik are just like the nicest guys. Why are they running with this guy who's a complete jerk?
Yeah, they're just mercs for hire or whatever, right? So yeah, that's the thing. I would have loved a little bit of just What's Fezzik steal? Like, you could have talked about anything. I don't know anything. I'm curious to read the book just to see like what was his, but like, because like, he ends up on the brute squad, so he's just later in the movie, so he's just a heavy hand for hire. But he has some morals. He doesn't like killing.
Yeah.
He's like, he told Fezzik, like, you didn't tell me they would be killing people. Like, so yeah, there's like a lovability to him, and Inigo too is just a totally honorable fighter, like, just allowing Wesley to come up and rest, and they chat, and there's
to
an
know each other a
honor.
little.
Yeah, there's an honor among these like elite fighters.
Yeah.
And then they have like such a great battle together. So yeah, like all these characters were given like a little something extra. Yeah, and Fezzik, I think Fezzik is probably the one like I wish I saw a little bit more, but he's funny and he rhymes and he's just a helpful.
He does.
He
helpful
rhymes.
big ope. Yeah.
David, you like your rhyming. If there's anything I know about you and people, you like people that rhyme.
I do
You gotta
like
rhyme.
rhyming. You gotta rhyme. Absolutely.
Wallace Shawn is probably my favorite character in the movie, honestly. Like, he is so fantastic as Vizzini, and I think every piece of dialogue that he has is memorable, and I think a role that he's never fully escaped either. But the I guess the fight scenes, you'd say, once they kidnap Buttercup and they're off, and the Dread Pirate Roberts shows back up conveniently, and the great shots climbing the cliffs of insanity. That's like clearly like stunt people versus the or professional climbers and wardrobe versus the close up of the actors on a stage. So
you mean Andre the Giant didn't drag 4 people up the mountain?
Believe it or not,
he could have.
Yeah, I just love that chase, the kind of energy level of are they getting away? Because Dread Pirate Roberts is catching up like very quickly to them. Like, he's so much faster than the three of them.
So much faster.
And the fight sequence, the first fight sequence, which is said as the second greatest fight in history, or sword fight in history, is a lot of work. It's like they put a lot of pressure on themselves to really have a believable sword fight with, of course, some flamboyance to it with the flips and they work in. But
some gymnastics.
Yeah, and Inigo, like, it's a great way to work in, because that's where I think they start to work in Inigo's backstory, right? They're like talking. Yeah. They're talking the entire time they're fighting.
Because he says, do you mind if I ask you a question? Do you have 6 fingers?
I do not mean to pry, but you don't by any chance happen to have 6 fingers on your right hand?
Do you always begin conversations this way?
My father was slaughtered by a 6-fingered man. Was a great sword maker, my father. When the 6-fingered man appeared and requested a special sword, my father took the job. He slept a year before he was done.
I've never seen its equal.
6-fingered man returned and demanded it, but at 1/10 his promised price. My father refused. Without a word, the 6-fingered man slashed him through the heart. I love my father, so naturally I challenged his murderer to a duel. I failed. 6-fingered man leave me alive. But he gave me this.
How old were you?
I was 11 years old. When I was strong enough, I dedicated my life to the study of fencing. So the next time we meet, I will not fail. I will go up to the 6-fingered man and say, hello, my name is Inigo Montoya. You killed my father, Prepare to die.
But that's funny. Like as they're fighting, they're like also bonding and connecting and getting respect for each other.
Right.
And he doesn't, and then the Wesley like doesn't end up killing him, which I think normally he would. He just knocks him out, and
Well, he doesn't kill anybody. I mean,
Right.
except. I mean, I guess technically, Benzini kills himself.
yes,
So
yeah. He outsmarts him into killing himself. But before
Right.
that, like the fight with when Wesley moves on and he takes on Fezzik, it's like it's the same thing. It's like more just getting respect and getting to know each other as they're fighting, and then he just
Yeah.
knocks him out with a sleeper.
yeah,
But the poison showdown with Vizzini is just a masterpiece of a scene. I mean, like that's to me, that's an iconic scene.
Yeah,
it is great.
The back and forth between the two of them, and Vizzini like outsmarting himself like 10 times over, you know?
Yeah.
Where is the poison? The battle of wits has begun. It ends when you decide and we both drink and find out who is right and who is dead.
But it's so simple. All I have to do is divine from what I know of you. Are you the sort of man who would put the poison into his own goblet or his enemies? Now, a clever man would put the poison into his own goblet because he would know that only a great fool would reach for what he was given. I'm not a great fool, so I can clearly not choose the wine in front of you. But you must have known I was not a great fool. You would have counted on it, so I can clearly not choose the wine in front of me.
You've made your decision then?
Not remotely, because iocane comes from Australia, as everyone knows. And Australia is entirely peopled with criminals. And criminals are used to having people not trust them as you are not trusted by me, so I can clearly not choose the wine in front of you.
Truly, you have a dizzying intellect.
Wait till I get going! Where was I?
Australia.
Yes, Australia. And you must have suspected I would have known the powder's origin, so I can clearly not choose the wine in front of me.
You're just stalling now.
You'd like to think that, wouldn't you? You've beaten my giant, which means you're exceptionally strong. So you could have put the poison in your own goblet, trusting on your strength to save you. So I can clearly not choose the wine in front of you. But you've also bested my Spaniard, which means you must have studied. And in studying, you must have learned that man is mortal. So you would have put the poison as far from yourself as possible. So I can clearly not choose the wine in front of me.
You're trying to trick me into giving away something. It won't work.
It has worked. You've given everything away. I know where the poison is.
Then make your choice.
I will. And I choose. What in the world can that be?
What? Where?
You only think I guessed wrong. That's what's so funny. I switched glasses when your back was turned. Ha ha, you fool. You fell victim to one of the classic blunders. The most famous is never get involved in a land war in Asia, but only slightly less well known is this. Never go in against a Sicilian when death is on the line.
It's I don't think I've ever seen, or we've never seen a scene like that or a character like that to
No.
date. So
I feel like at this point now it's been mimicked over and over again. But yeah, it was nice to see this at the time as kind of the first pass. I wonder if it really is the first pass, but it's so great.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to see like what other things they had going on during that scene. What other because I feel like there's
Ideas.
probably some improv happening, some other like
Gotta
ideas
be,
of
right?
what. Yeah. That's a scene that probably in post got really shaped to the perfect scene that it is.
Yeah, it's great.
But yeah, and it's important that to keep it like you were saying that Wesley doesn't kill anybody. Even if he had killed Vizzini, it's sort of understandable because Vizzini is a villain.
He is the real bad guy.
Yeah, he really is.
He's the mastermind in air quotes.
Yeah. So you could understand it, but at this point we're keeping Wesley even separate from the Dread Pirate Roberts, who has this reputation of being this brutal killer on the seas. That we see, like we know as an audience, it's Wesley that Wesley didn't take on that part of Dread Pirate Roberts. He took on the persona, but not the actual killer attitude. So
yeah, now it's just the persona. People will just turn over their loot because they're afraid for their life.
It's a character, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Which is also part of that
explained.
backstory.
Yeah, gets explained.
Yeah, and then we have the scene we mentioned, falling down the hill, and that's where Buttercup realizes that Dread Pirate Roberts is Wesley, and she, pushes him down the hill, and he's saying, "As you wish," as he tumbles down. Then she realizes it's him, her beautiful Wesley that she thought was long dead. That she dives down the hill after him, and so. And then we get to our next characters, the Rodents of Unusual Size.
The Ruse? Yeah, the ROUSs?
The ROUSs.
I like the practical puppet costume, and just
that almost feels like Muppet, like a Jim Henson kind of costume, right?
Yeah. It definitely feels like it, like that. I've got the what do you call it, never ending story vibe, because it's swampy and otherworldly creature, but it definitely looks like a puppet, but you just buy into it. And it's scary enough on its own. And that's just those little subtle things. They're not like, there's these little jokes throughout the whole movie that it's not, it's only so much of it is played toward the audience, like, hey, we're making jokes here, get ready to laugh. Like it's not like that at all in this film. It's just this little extra layer that makes it so whimsical and just fun. Like you just kind of relax and go with the story. You don't have to like, wait, where are these rats coming from? Why would they live in a swamp? Swamp. What's a fire swamp?
Just believe it. You just believe it.
Yeah. And lightning sand is such a great concept, instead of like
quicksand.
It's a lightning sand, so you just sink to the bottom immediately.
Like immediately you're down. What a great scene. And I love that name, Rodents of, like that's just what they are. They're large rodents.
It's very on the nose.
It's like, I don't think they exist, and then just off screen one jumps into frame on top. Like he said they're a myth. Boom. And anyway, sorry, just reliving our favorite moments.
And then they walk right into the hands of our real villains of the movie, played by Chris Sarandon and Christopher Guest, who are also, important characters, not as spoken about as the rest of the cast, but Chris Sarandon is such a great, like, prince, like evil prince.
Oh yeah. He's got it. He's definitely got it down to that stereotypical T, where it's like, okay,
that's all it needed though.
Guy. I forgot Chris Guest was in this, to be honest. Like I when I think of him, this is not the character, like I just forget that he's the six-fingered man. And it's always a pleasant surprise when we get to it. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's Chris Guest. That's great.
Yeah. Well, he's playing it so straight, and you rarely see Christopher Guest play straight characters like that without some kind of, there's really no comedy other than that he's the six-fingered man. And as soon as you see that, okay, Inigo is going to catch up and meet up with him at some point here.
Yeah, and that's probably where the comedy comes in for me. Is like, running down the hall and running away from, and then
the
quickly
turns,
and then quickly turns to the duel. But yeah, I always love being reminded that he's in it.
Yeah, it's it's not the typical Christopher Guest, but he's great in it. And that the scene at the end, that the showdown between Inigo and the six-fingered man is really fun. That Inigo is sort of getting it, is sort of on the losing end, but then his heart and his passion, just motivates him to, like, almost like a Rocky like comeback and
a bit
and kill him. So and where just that moment where they're trying to make a deal, he's the six-fingered man's trying to make a deal with him, like, as he knows he's gonna lose. So great moment for Inigo. But yeah, so and Christopher Guest and has that long career with Rob Reiner, so the kind of cross paths early on in their careers. Spinal Tap, obviously the big connection, but Castle Rock Entertainment, which is Rob Reiner's company, produces, I think, all of Christopher Guest's feature films. So, that relationship kept going. And I think Christopher Guest pops up in other Rob Reiner movies. Like he's in A Few Good Men as like a forensic, analysis. Like he goes on trial. He's in the trial for like a minute. So, it's a friendship that would keep going. So, yeah. And the whole time, obviously our characters have separated here, that Buttercup and Wesley are now kind of imprisoned by Prince Humperdinck, right?
Yep.
And Wesley is taken to the pit of despair, where he is the torturing of him is horrifying and hilarious at the same time.
Yeah, a suction cup life stealer,
a life sucker.
It sucks the life out of him.
Yeah.
Which is
perfect.
Yeah.
Because it's not magic. It's like we'd expect it. Like it is this like fantasy machine, since like the only machines they have are are fulcrums and levers and pulleys and the wheel.
It's got a
it's a hydro operated machine.
Yeah. So it's got that extra level of fantasy without it being too like there's no magic in the fantasy world. It doesn't matter, but it's almost magic. It's that science looking like magic kind of thing.
Yeah. And they torture him to death, really. I mean, it's actually kind of messed up what they suck the life out of him and they turn it all the way up to like as high as it goes, and you can like
Humperdinck wants to kill him. Yeah, it's his revenge. He wants to kill him in front of Buttercup, because even what's his face, Rugen, Christopher Guest's character, he's like a scientist or something. He's experimenting with torture, and he wants to take copious notes. And
like, he wants to hear the feedback, right?
Yeah. He's like,
how do you feel?
Honest. yeah. And even he doesn't want him to turn it up to 50 years.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, he goes into a jealous rage after Buttercup kind of basically says that to Humperdinck that he'll never be as good a man as Wesley was, right? Because there's this whole kind of subplot going on where he's pretending to be sending messengers out to try and find Wesley to bring him back to see if he'll marry Buttercup, but that's not really what's happening. He's taken him to torture him.
Yeah. And while this is all going on, we have Fezzik and Inigo who kind of meet back up with each other and are kind of the worse for wear, and cross paths and set out to find Buttercup, right? And Wesley, and continue their own mission as well.
Right. I got the sense that Inigo and what's under the Fezzik,
yep,
that they're kind of companions just in general. Like they kind of always meet up and are working together. And then Zini is like he happened to hire them, maybe. Like I don't know if they had worked together before, but those two seem to be kind of
a team. Yeah. And they eventually find Wesley and kind of take his body, and then they come to Miracle Max, which is played by Billy Crystal, and we get Carol Kane in here as Max's wife. What a energetic scene with the two of them.
Yeah.
True love, you heard him? You could not ask for a more noble cause than that.
Sonny, true love is the greatest thing in the world. Except for nice MLT, mutton, lettuce, and tomato sandwich when the mutton is nice and lean and the tomatoes are ripe. They're so perky. I love that. But that's not what he said. He distinctly said to blave. And as we all know, to blave means to bluff. Huh? So you're probably playing cards, and he cheated.
Liar!
Get back, witch!
I'm not a witch, I'm your wife. But after what you just said, I'm not even sure I want to be that anymore.
You never had it so good.
He's so Billy Crystal. You never had it so good. Just so many it's all jokes. It's all funny. It's wonderful. It's a nice
basically playing like an old Jewish couple.
Yeah.
Under heavy makeup.
Yeah, you'd never know it was them. It doesn't look like Billy Crystal at all.
Yeah. I think the first time I saw it too, like I just seen Throw Mama from a Train, I think. And I was like, wait, that's like certain things just blew my mind. It's like that guy's Billy Crystal. But yeah, it's such a very like intense, couple of characters that come in, but they help revive Wesley and bring him back to life. And then after that, it's really just they're going to storm the castle and rescue Buttercup and hopefully kill Humperdinck. And Cary Elwes's physical comedy for the rest of the movie is incredible. That Wesley is very slowly coming back to life and really doesn't have control of his body yet. So little by little, like, oh, now he can blink, now he can talk, now he can move like his right arm, and that's it. So he's headed directly into this showdown that he's going to have to duel with Humperdinck.
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting play on like the ticking clock, right? Like it's kind of like a reverse. Like he's going to eventually get feeling back, but you don't know if it's going to be in time to take on Humperdinck. And so, which is great because that plays into that scene where they do finally come face to face.
Yeah, totally. It's really smartly done the way they story-wise, how the characters are split up and divided into their own. I guess Fezzik's kind of just more like floating around, but he's doing the physical tasks that need to be done to like break into the castle, and the cloak that he wears that they set on fire.
Yeah, the Holocaust cloak. He just happens to have like it fits, so
like in his back pocket.
Have it. Yeah.
Well, he grabbed it. I think he said he grabbed it from Miracle Max's. Maybe there was somewhere that he picked it up. That
I just like that. It's like it's that magical animation pocket where it's like, the character needs something, so they just reach behind themselves and they're like, "Bing! Here it is. I have it."
Yeah. So we get split up where Fezzik's kind of doing the physical roles. Inigo is off on his journey fighting the six-fingered man and gaining his revenge. And Wesley is, I don't know, paralyzed is not the right word, but but whether his body is functioning or not, he has found his way to Humperdinck and has that great back and forth whether or not he's bluffing about whether he can duel or not.
Right.
And he has just enough energy to stand up and point and prove that he can fight, and then Humperdinck falls for it.
Yeah.
It's just so well done between all of them, and it's great payoffs for all of our characters, and and it's the ultimate like happy ending here for the story, that everyone ends where you as an audience really want them to end. And what's great is along the way we're intercutting with the grandfather and grandson, so we keep checking in. It's almost like Rob Reiner checking in with us, is like, hey, are we good? We're still good with the story, right? Like even though there's some romance and some kissing, like we're cool, right? We can keep going.
Yeah.
And Fred Savage is just like us, like, yeah, keep reading. I'm good.
It's okay. Let's.
Yeah. But you could read one more chapter.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an awesome payoff.
Yeah. It's and it's great, and it just ending with Mark Knopfler's great score that's so fitting for the film. It really is. I don't know. Would you say the movie is a masterpiece?
I mean,
I think I would.
I don't know that there's anything that you can really knock it for. I mean, like maybe you're not into fairy tales and fantasy. Okay, so it's not your cup of tea. But like from a storytelling standpoint, like it's pretty buttoned up.
Yeah.
Solid script.
I mean, Yeah, it's like story wise, I don't think there's anything that needs to change. There's no the only thing that kind of stands out, it's a very white cast, you know. So
Oh, yeah.
today I think you would probably change that aspect of it a little bit, but that's really, yeah, that doesn't affect the characters at all. It doesn't affect the dialogue or any of the action that happens in any way. It's just, you know, just was kind of one of those things that it's part of being a product of its time.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that I feel like something stood out to me when I was watching it, maybe in the Billy Crystal scene, or
there might be a couple of comments that you would,
yeah, just comments that you
Yeah.
probably would change, but not anything like egregious that would, you know, it's not truly offensive, I don't think, but I think
Yeah.
would be maybe altered.
And it's taking, you know, a pretty old-fashioned look at women. You know, it's either the damsel in
Sure.
distress, who's also a strong character and can try to hold her own a little bit, but or they're the nagging wife. So it's those are the two
Yeah.
versions of women you get here. That is sort of a problem. So, I mean, what if you
Yeah.
made like an Inigo Montoya a woman today?
Probably would be. It'd be Emma
Yeah.
Stone, and it would.
I would say like today, like in the Dungeons and Dragons movie, it's Michelle Rodriguez's character is sort of that Inigo type.
Right. Yeah. That seems current.
But it's still, I think the movie still, you know, is really strong. It's entertaining. It's kind of wonderful to watch. It's funny. I love seeing all of this cast together. And Andre the Giant, you know, I think this is one of the few film performances he'd done, definitely his biggest. So, you know, such a charming character here. Should we check out how it did at the box office with a little box office glory?
Yes.
Yes.
The Princess Bride had a $16 million budget. It shot all over England and Ireland in late 1986. It opens up in limited release September 25th, 1987, and goes wide about 2 weeks later on October 9th. So October 9th, it lands at number 3, opening up against Someone to Watch Over Me, Surrender, 3 O'Clock High, and Baby Boom. What a handful of movies there.
3 O'Clock High and Baby Boom, I remember. 3 O'Clock High is probably the only one I've seen or would be interested to watch again. I don't even know what the first two. What were the first two?
Someone to Watch Over Me is a Ridley Scott movie.
I don't know
Tom
that I saw it.
Berenger. I want to say I haven't seen it in forever, but and Surrender is one of those that I'm not remembering it right now, but I'll look it up and remember it and be ashamed I didn't recall it.
You'd be like, oh yeah.
Yeah, so it landed right between Like Father, Like Son and Someone to Watch Over Me at number 3. So
I do remember Like Father, Like Son.
Oh yeah, well it's your favorite, Kirk Cameron
and Dudley, right?
The world's favorite, Kirk Cameron.
At
and
the
Dudley
time,
Moore.
At the time, he was pretty darn popular.
Yes, I saw that's in my grandma collection. I saw that with my grandma in the theater. Saw Like Father, Like Son, and vice versa with her in the theater. So we were into the body swap comedy.
Yeah, I saw both those in the theater as well. I don't know who I was with. I think Like Father, Like Son, I was actually with my father, but vice versa, I have no idea.
Yeah. All right, so it took in $5 million its first week in wide release. It ended up with a $30.8 million domestic run, only about 200,000 internationally. So not a lot, a $31 million grand total, but that's really like not where it found its success, was not in theaters. So it got by, was, I would say, passable at best, box office wise. It ends up as number 38 of 87, right between Can't Buy Me Love and Harry and the Hendersons.
Ooh. Saw that one in the theater too.
Yeah.
Oof.
Top of the box office in 87, as we've mentioned several times before, 3 Men and a Baby, which you can listen to in the archives at ReconCinemation.com, Fatal Attraction, and Beverly Hills Cop 2. Now, look at that. That's just an example of like the kinds of movies that were made then versus now. You won't see I guess maybe this year might be 2023 is an exception, but traditionally now you would not see non-franchise movies as your top 2 box office takes.
Well, this year's 2024, but
Yes,
yes.
but 23 we can fully look at 23's box office. So.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah, but really where it finds its legs is in video stores. And this is why video stores were so important. And the problem with streaming is you don't have these movies that will find a second life, or very, very rarely, and it seems to happen more with TV shows, like whatever happened with Suits last year. That on video stores, like, things could catch fire, word of mouth could spread. There's people together in stores talking about movies and comparing thoughts and notes, and it was a beautiful thing. And now when you're just scrolling through whatever image the streaming network puts on there, like when I go through Netflix, like, it's hard to even find older movies. We'll see like 1 or 2, but it's all just the Netflix stuff or brand new films. But if you're digging for something older, it's harder to find it. You have to go to like HBO or Max or whatever it is, or Criterion. Like, those are things that promote older content as well. But I don't know, like, if this came out in a streaming era, I don't know if it would have the success that it had because of video stores.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, the video stores, when you see all the VHS copies up on the wall, and it's like, it's a big display. I don't know. It's different than when I'm flipping through what's new on whatever streamer that I'm looking at. Like, it just doesn't catch me enough. Everything is so much more distracting on the streamers. I end up scrolling for hours just to find something that by the time it took me to find it, I could have watched something already. Like,
right.
I don't know.
Exactly. So yay for physical media. So video stores, if you have any in your area, wherever you are, help them, support them, go in there.
Support your local video store.
Where do you guys rank this versus like Rob Reiner's other? We've talked about a lot about his other films and how, important they were, especially in their time, and how great films many of them are. Where does this one rank to you? Is this in the top 3, 4, 5, top 10? What do you guys think?
All of the above.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just yeah, it's definitely up there. It's, I don't know, it's part of his greatest hits. This would always be on the greatest hits album for him.
It might. I think it's in my top 3. I mean, I think my favorite, which I mentioned earlier, is Stand By Me. For I don't know, that one I just really, really enjoy. But this is probably my second. I mean, it depends. I haven't seen Misery in a long time, but it's very good. But this one again is like, I guess my top 3 would be Stand By Me, Princess Bride, and actually, when Harry Met Sally, if I was really like put to it. But that's just based on which ones I've watched the most in my life.
Yeah. I would say, my top Reiner films, I would put Spinal Tap, then Princess Bride, then Stand By Me, then probably Misery, then When Harry Met Sally, I think is my top, what is that, 5? I think that's my top 5. And then, then I would put probably Few Good Men and Sure Thing, American President after that. I might be missing one in there. I feel like I'm missing something.
Yeah. My top 5 is probably pretty similar. I'm not as big a fan of the Spinal Tap as most people, I think, who enjoy it are. But I do recognize it for what it is and think it's great. But I missed it when it came out. I was confused by it because I didn't understand like mockumentaries at the time when it came out, and my first introduction to it, actually, where I understood anything, was Columbia House CDs, and I got the Spinal Tap music CD for whatever reason, and listened to that and didn't really like the music. So I was like, I don't think I like it. It took many years later until I realized that it was all just a big joke and that the movie was a fake documentary. And so I think that put me off of it because I was too dumb to understand what was actually going on. It was over my head. So, so yeah, I missed the window.
Stuff when you're 5, 6, 7 years old. You don't
Yeah,
understand
I
the deep comedy.
Yeah, I didn't have a guide leading me down the road to explain what I was experiencing. So,
yeah, I didn't get into Spinal Tap till we hit college. You know, I was late on Guffman even, but we'll talk a lot about Spinal Tap when we cover that episode because I have a lot of thoughts about the genius of the lyrics and like how smart those lyrics are and deeply funny while at the same time actually sounding like real music of the time period, that they fooled people that they weren't a real band.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to revisiting it because I'm hoping now in older age I'll have a different appreciation for it. But
yeah,
I've only really seen it once and listened to the soundtrack a few dozen times, but was just never.
Even their second album, Break Like the Wind is it's almost just as good. It's really, really solid.
All right. Well, to be continued. Coming to a podcast near you very soon, I'm sure.
But I think for Princess Bride, you know, if you haven't seen it in a long time, give it another shot. If you've got kids that are, you know, the right age, and I mean like probably 7, 8, you know, to anywhere older than that, just like definitely sit down and watch it together as a family. It's a great family film. It's wholesome. It's, you know, it just hits all the right notes, and there's something in it for everybody.
Yeah, like I was saying earlier, I just watched it with my 11-year-old, and he does not like movies. It's heartbreaking to me, but he enjoyed this one. I even asked. I was like, "Did you like it?" Because he knew we were going to record today, and he said, "Yeah, it was good."
Yeah.
So if he's sold, I think anybody could be sold.
Yeah, similar with mine. That he's into the gaming, but struggles with movies. But this was one that we had it on, and he laid down and made it through the whole movie. So
yeah.
And if you're looking for more about Princess Bride, Carrie Elwes put a book out, I want to say within the last 2 years or so. It's called As You Wish, Inconceivable Tales from the Making of the Princess Bride. So a whole book full of stories about how everything came together. There's a lot of Andre the Giant stories about what was going on behind the scenes there and kind of his escapades. So, which is always fascinating, especially if you haven't seen any of the documentaries on him. So you can check that out. And like usual, you can, you know what? Before I do our wrap out here, we got to come back to 6 Degrees of ReconCinemation. Who's ready to connect Commando, that great fairy tale film, to this one, The Princess Bride?
I'm good. I could do it.
I got something.
It's garbage. Mine is garbage. Carrie Elwes was in Liar Liar with Jim Carrey, who is in Batman Forever with Chris O'Donnell, who is in Batman and Robin with Arnold Schwarzenegger, who is our lead in Commando.
Oh, nice. See, that's good. See,
yeah, you did it.
I struggled because I was trying to connect Fred Savage to Alyssa Milano, who both at the time were huge child actors that I liked as a kid. I loved Wonder Years. I loved Who's the Boss. I think my first maybe my first crush was Punky Brewster. Second crush was definitely Sam from Who's the Boss. So I tried to link it that way, and I struggled a little bit, but I got to Fred Savage is in Goldmember with Seth Green. Seth Green is in Entourage, which is a real cop out because Entourage, everybody made it.
Everybody's in it.
Yeah. So that's where I failed miserably. Is I'm using Entourage. I tried to work my way around it. It didn't happen. So I got Entourage. Mark Wahlberg is also in Entourage. He is in Fear. Alyssa Milano is in Fear. with Mark Wahlberg and Reese Witherspoon. So I got there.
You got there.
I struggled.
Nice.
I know
Well
there's a
done.
million different ways that we could have done that. I don't necessarily love mine, but I gave myself an obstacle that
It's a nice
that
path.
I had to go through.
That's a tough route, but you did it.
Yeah.
The,
You'd think it wouldn't be. I was like, oh, dude, these guys, they're like child actors that they would have had to have been in something together at some point. They were not. I mean, because Alyssa Milano's career after Who's the Boss kind of took a dip until a little bit later. Like she picked back up with Charmed and things like that and really got back on the radar and all that. Fred Savage, similarly, kind of like dipped after The Wizard. And then it was, I think Austin Powers really kind of put him, he was doing a bunch of stuff back behind the scenes, but just as an actor and things like that. They both have been super busy. It's not like they've really struggled in their career, but from a on-screen personality standpoint, I had a hard time finding them together.
The answer I was looking for was
now it's looking for okay.
Andre the Giant is in Conan the Destroyer with Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Sure, that's if you want to take the easy way out, John.
There's so many journeys you can take to get there.
Easy way out.
That's the fun of.
I should have known it had something to do with Andre since it was your pick.
That's true. That was a lot of fun, and we'll have much more of that in our next episodes. But speaking of that, we've done romance this month. Next up,
we have
sports romance, and following that will be sports. We're relevant in the month of February. So,
well, I mean, come on, you gotta do a mix, right? Like, I mean, it's February. It's the romance month.
We're not going to say what it is. We'll leave you. We'll dangle that carrot for you, but we'll.
You'd be surprised how few movies there are that have both sports and romance.
Yeah.
In this regard.
Not a deep category, so. So stay tuned for that. You can check out our archives at ReconCinemation.com. Check us out on social media. We're ReconCinemation Podcast everywhere. And thank you to our friends, E.K. Wimmer for the theme music, Curtis Moore for the poster. And I'm excited for some sports romance. And we will see you guys next time on ReconCinemation.
Take care.
Bye now.
He didn't fall? Inconceivable. You keep using the word. I do not think it means what you think it means.